Perek Halacha Vov. Hilchos kommen zu Matzah. Ram says, Ein boilen is as oirim b'mayim Pesach. You do not soak the barley in water on Pesach. So let's go down to the Pirush. Ein boilen b'mayim is as oirim b'mayim Pesach. Rabbeinu Manoach explains. Lila means, it's called l'siso. You find this in the Gemara in Pesachim 48. That they would soak the barley in water, and afterwards they would make it into flour by first of all smashing off the outer husk, and if while they were in the water, as we mentioned in the previous year, they began to expand, you would see the outer husk actually break open. But otherwise, they're mutter. The Magen Mishnah cites the Gemara that you don't soak the soirim. Amar ukfe. It doesn't mean that they were actually broke open, but anything that you put on top of a vent and it breaks open by itself is considered being Chometz. The Rif explains in the Geonim, Shebiv is a vessel that you cook in it, and if you leave it on the face, on the mouth of this biv, it would crack. It's also, even though it didn't break yet. Shmuel says it has to have actually broken open. The Riv Paskins the Chumrah, the meaning the Chumrah here is that even if it didn't crack, if you estimate that if you would leave it on a bit of heat, it would crack open, then it's also. The Rambam Paskins that you do not soak Zorim and Mayim on Pesach because that barley is not a hard cover, and therefore, since it's soft, it becomes chometz quickly. Bolal, if you did mix it, im rofu kedei she'manichan al pi abiv she'ofen olav ha'chalos yidboku, if they are so soft that if you put them on top of this vessel that you bake in it, the breads, they would crack open. They're forbidden to be used for Pesach. Ram Paskins came out for the Chumrah. Even if they did not become to this level of softness, then Arayel Mutor. Rabbeinu Manoach explains that the Chumrah is that even if the Siorim, the barley, weren't that soft from soaking in water, still, if the heat that would be residual heat in these vessels would cause it to crack open, the Ram is the opinion, like the Riv, the Goinim, that you don't eat it on Pesach. You can't use the flour from it. Rabbi Menach says that Rashi has a text not hachovis on a barrel. If he puts it on the barrel, the cover of a barrel of wine, the top of a barrel of wine, the wine will cause it to split open, the vapor from the wine. And they need to be very, very soft to do that. But therefore, Rashi is a little bit more lenient than the Halacha. But the Halacha, we'll go to the next Halacha, which is Halacha Zayin. Hachitim mutar livloi loisam b'mayim k'dei la'osir subon. So we're going to talk about the question of placing chitim in water to take off the outer husk, and what happens if grain became wet. So the Rambam says, "Achitim mutar livloil oison b'mayim k'dei lahosir suban." You can take off the outer shell, as we said, by soaking them in water. And afterwards, you can grind them immediately. That's how you do flour. And the Maggid Mishnah cites Psachim 40a that you can soak them. And soaking by wheat as opposed to barley, which we spoke about in Vov, because they're not as soft as barley. And therefore, barley tends to become chometz quicker, the kernels. And since wheat is harder, therefore, you can clean the husk with water. because they do not become chometz. The Maggid Mishnah cites that you grind them, because if you leave them after they were in water, then they'll certainly become chometz. But here we're talking about, they used to have this, they still have in some places where they grind it with water. And the Gemara says in Sochem 40b that a boat that was full of wheat that sank, and now they pulled out the barrels of wheat. They're also because they touched the water and became chometz. Now, some say l'sisa is only with a little bit of water. It's not enough to cause it to be chometz, and therefore, even if you'll stay there a long time, they won't become chometz. But when it's a lot of water, like when a boat sank in a river, then for sure it would be chometz. And he says that you have to. The only time you consider the wheat not chometzdik is if you grind it immediately after contact with water, and you take off the husk. Rabbeinu Menoyach says that Rov HaGo'onim said it's mutter to grind these wheat, because they're hard and they don't swiftly become chometz. He brings proof from Psochim 40b about nefesh. Somebody who wants to be machmir, to be stringent, should not use water to take off the husks. The Rambam continues, and all of Klal Yisrael in Bovel, Uberetz Hatzvi in Eretz Yisrael, Besfard and Spain, Uboria Ma'ariv, and the cities of the west, Shelo Yivloil, Achitim Amayim, Ksei Hashem Yeshu. They should not take off the husks with water, lest they leave them there too long, v'yachmitz, and they'll become chometz. The Rif cites that it's a takonos hago'onim, and this is the lotion of the Rif that's brought down in the Maggid Mishnah. Today, that they sent from the yeshiva, because Bovel was the center of Torah. They sent from the yeshiva that we're not bekiim, we're not experts how long to soak them, and therefore we don't do it. Rabbeinu Menoyach cites of Haigoin. He wrote that even though in the time of the Gemara they did so, still today the minhag is not to do so for many hundreds of years, because we don't know how much water they used or how it could be done. Rabbi Maimonides, he cites that you have to check the salt before Pesach, because it's mixed with wheat. When the salt becomes wet, then the water will go into the wheat, and they cause it to become chometz. Now, chitin, wheat or flour that became wet. The Aim writes that chitin yishvuim b'mayim kaim olam kirova. We are like rova. It says in the mitzvah losois, and therefore chitim which are bought in the marketplace, and rain fell upon them, you don't have to worry about the fact that whether they became chometz or not. You can rely on that wheat and that flour. That's why technically you can rely on flour that was watched only from the time that it was flour, because we assume it did not become chometz. Furthermore, in the Gemara in Psochim 40a, it tells us that the entire time that, let's assume there's a dripping on the flour, then that in itself is something that will hold back the process of chimutz. But the Goyes Maimonides says that's only when they go one after the other. But if it's from the rain, then it's a different story, rather than one drip in one place continuously. Now, somebody who eats it would be chayav koros, because it's chometz gomer, according to the Hagoyes Maimonides. And if you keep it on Pesach, by Motza, just like a boat that sank, that all the chometz, even though that the the grains did not break open, still you're not allowed to keep it. And what you check it is, if they broke open, that's only when you have a little bit of water. But when it's a lot of water, as we mentioned earlier, even if it didn't crack the outer husk, it's forbidden. Rabbeinu Yoel Halevi permitted to buy wheat that you bring in a boat for Pesach, because even though the water gets into the boat, but because the boat is moving, therefore it doesn't become chometz. But what's in the bottom of the boat, that there's a lot of water, if you find a bag of wheat there, it's forbidden. Of not wheat, a bag of wheat, of kernels, and water that fell on a flour bag, or the bag of flour fell into mud. Rabbeinu Simcha Shmaya said you could blow on it. So too with water, and if it looks, you can sift it, and therefore that which is coagulated together will be look like dough, and it won't go through the holes of the sieve, and you'll only have a kemach flour which you can use. He brings a proof of this from Yerushalmi Perek Shah. In the Rosh writes the heter to sieve to sift the flour is a very great kula, because its chometz is also a mashu. Maybe something will go through in the crack as well. And he said it's also b'taruvis if it's mixed even b'kolshu. And he writes, therefore, the Rosh writes, there are those who say the halacha is that if it became wet, he should take that pot and not allow any part of that to come out of the bag until he's gotten the other flour from the pot that's not wet out, and then he should throw it out. And that's enough. Halacha l'maisa, the Shulchan Aruch paskins. If water fell on flour, or the sack became wet, dirty, he should hold that place until he takes out the flour. If he can't do that, he should use the sieve. The rest is, and whatever doesn't go through the sieve is forbidden. Whatever goes through is mutter. The Biur Halacha says that this is the das Rikeach, that the Agoyas Mammon is brought down b'Shem Rabbeinu Yoel Halevi. The Biur Halacha says that even though the Rosh writes it's a kula, still Mechaber relies on it, because that's also the opinion of the Mordechai. The Mechaber continues, but if it became dry, it doesn't help sifting it, because it'll go through the sieve, and then it's forbidden. Here, like he's codifying the halacha like the Rosh, that since it's dry, it doesn't help. And Mahaber says Eliyak Yirak Denun, and the Mishnah Berurah explains that you have to put it through a sieve in order to burn out the chometz there. And after you got out the chometz, the shar you can keep. It's not over on Pesach for the minute amount that might still be there, because that far we weren't machmir on him. Furthermore, the Shulchan Aruch says you should check the salt separated from wheat, because when the salt sweats, the water goes into the chitin and causes it to become chometz, the kernels of wheat, and the chita will give also a tam of chometz into the melach. Today we only use salt that has a hechsher, that you can rely on them, that there was no chash of chometz. Furthermore, the Shulchan Aruch says today, nowadays you cannot take off the husks with water, the sisa, whether they're kernels or whether of wheat or of barley. Mishnah Berurah says, even though in time of the Gemara they only forbade soirim, but which is softer than wheat, afterwards they said the same would apply to shibboleth shor v'shifra, and then we're not sure today, but it would seem kernels of wheat that they're very hard, they would not become chometz, and it would be mutter to wash off the husks. But today it's also forbidden because we don't know how to do that either. The Mishnah Berurah says further, the seesaw is explained in the Rambam. You mix chitim with water and then you grind it right away. Rashi explains that you just make them a bit wet before you grind them. Now, the klipo, you take off the morsinim, which is the outer husk, so that you won't have bran in the flour. And he cites that it's forbidden. The Chachomim said it's also. The Goinim said it's also because we don't know how to do it. It will become chometz. Furthermore, maybe you won't do it as quickly enough. And we're afraid they'll become chometz, like the Rambam said in Halacha Zayin. If it was over and he didn't mix it in water, you can't eat it, or leave it for, or benefit from on Pesach. But still, to leave wheat flour that it was a little bit in water, you're allowed to, if it was only a bit of water, and he ground it right away. But barley, even in this fashion, would be forbidden because they're soft, more so, and they become chometz through the seesaw. The Mishnah Berurah, Paskins, Rifus, we call Negalach, or Krisim, they're made from 1 to 5 minim. You can't leave them on Pesach because you leave them a long time in water before you make from them grain. And there's chometz gomo. If you left it, there are those who say it's forbidden to sell it to a goy after Pesach. But Eliyahu Rabbo says in the name of his grandfather that you can sell it if the grains did not split before, because it's only Savik chometz. You can make it was all about Pesach when it's Isser Rabbanan. And if it was made from Shibboleth Shoel, then it's a greater fear that it became chometz, and you can't sell it to a goy after Pesach.